Before I start on Doctor Who Season 20, it's time for another detour to a story that's set between the two seasons. Spare Parts is a Big Finish audio drama released in 2002, written by Mark Platt and starring Peter Davison and Sarah Sutton. It's set on the planet Mondas, which featured in The 10th Planet back in 1966, but this time we get to see what it's actually like. This takes place sometime before the 10th Planet, where Mondas is hurtling through space towards a deadly nebula. The inhabitants all live in an underground city, and they develop cyber technology to allow astronauts to go out on the surface and install engines that will allow them to stay their planet to safety. The world is well realised, with a feel of 1950s Britain, but with more advanced technology. People are getting artificial limbs, cyber mats are in every home, and it all seems scarily plausible that they could all end up becoming Cybermen. The cast all do a good job. The most recognisable name is Celine Yvette, who played Callie in Blake 7. Here she gives a very different performance as Dr. Man Allen, who basically created the Cybermen as a way to save her people, but turns to drink when she realises it's all gone a bit too far. The rest of the cast adapt northern accents, which makes it all feel like it's taking place in a small Yorkshire town, kind of like Last of the Summer Wine. There's the Hartley family who befriend Nyssa, and are really the emotional heart of the story, as one of them ends up being turned into a Cyberman. And there's also Thomas Dodd, who sells body parts, and he kind of becomes the Doctor's sidekick. He's played by Darren Nesbitt, who provides plenty of black humour to balance out the more serious side of the rest of the production. The big appeal of bringing back Mondasian Cybermen is, of course, their unique voices, and Nicholas Briggs clearly has a lot of fun replicating them. With the hypnic star speaking. Unfortunately, the voice of the Cyber Committee is processed a bit too much, so it's rather unintelligible. We also get to see new sides of the Doctor and Nyssa. Peter Davison, as the Doctor, gets to wrestle with a moral dilemma, as he feels he can't stop the Mondasian Cybermen from being created without breaking the laws of time, which seems a bit hypocritical, as he did try to prevent the creation of the Daleks that time. But that did kick off the Time War, so maybe he's got a point. Sarah Sutton as Nyssa gets to show more emotion than usual, with a nice scene where she reminisces about autumn festivals on Traken, and she gets to show anger at the prospect of the Cybermen continuing after they were recently responsible for the death of Adric. So the two characters are in conflict for most of the story, which gives a nice edge to their relationship. But when the Doctor faces the prospect of future Cybermen being based on his own genetic template, he decides that enough's enough and it is probably about time to stop them. So better late than never. Being a prequel, the ending was always going to be a bit of a problem, as we know that the entire population of Mondas do eventually end up being converted, so it could have ended up being very bleak. As it is, the Doctor manages to stop the immediate threat, but Mondas is still heading for Earth, and the Cybermen are already established there, so everything could still happen as it did in the 10th Planet. It's possible that they intended to do a sequel, filling in the gap, but 22 years later they still haven't gone back to the well, which is probably a good thing. Franchises such as Star Wars and Lord of the Rings are doing endless prequels that fill in the gaps between events, which are just exhausting to keep up with, so maybe it's good that they leave the odd gap now and again. I was always curious about this story, as it was said to have inspired the Rise of the Cybermen Age of Steel two-parter back in 2006, but it turns out to be a very different story. It's really just the basic idea of showing how Cybermen come to be created in the first place. If anything, I would say that the story seems to have been a much bigger influence on World Enough and Time, the 2017 episode, which also features Mondasian Cybermen. Both stories do have scenes where familiar characters are turned into Cybermen, and you could argue that they were both inspired by this one. Only the transformation in this story is possibly even more horrific, as the horrifying transformation is left to the listener's imagination, which could well be more horrific than anything the TV series is allowed to show. Overall, it's a fine production, conjuring up a believable alternate world on the brink of disaster. Maybe it doesn't go quite as far as it could, but it's a definite high point of the audios all the same. There are many other Big Finish audios featuring the 5th Doctor. Peter Davison is still making a few every year, and he's a very good actor, so I'm sure they're all decent at least. I'll be sticking with the TV stories for now, but I might return to Big Finish when I get to the 6th Doctor era, early next year probably. Apparently Colin Baker is a lot better in the audios than he is on screen. And his early audios are available on streaming services such as Spotify or Amazon Music, which is where I listen to this one. So I might just listen to a bunch of them and then do a roundup video telling you what I think. So look out for that sometime next year. Meanwhile, I'll be carrying on with my 5th Doctor rewatch with the Arc of Infinity coming next Monday. So press subscribe if you want to continue following my journey through Doctor Who, and I'll see you next time.